All right, Tom Woods has the great new book out. It's called Nullification, How to Resist Federal Tyranny in the 21st Century. Should have the link up. It's been up for a week at MikeChurch.com on the front page. And it's always a pleasure to have Dr. Woods here, who is now officially a doctor. Hello, my good friend Tom Woods. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike.
So what do you think about what Governor Brewer just said? What would your advice to her be?
Well, it seems to me that the bulk of the evidence makes pretty clear the states have the power to deal with this issue, that at the very least this is a power that's jointly held, but that the framers seem to have taken for granted that the states would oversee questions like this, so that when we decide how power is distributed, this really remains with the states. And I guess I'm not as worried. You know, there are a lot of civil libertarians worried about the Arizona law. I guess I'm just not one of them. I mean, if this is the political arrangement we have, it seems to me that I don't see the big problem with the state asking, are you here legally, given that a lot of the goodies that you get because you live in a state are premised on whether or not you're there legally. I mean, how else do you keep a French tourist from collecting welfare? You do have to ask at some point, are you here legally?
Well, I don't have any problem with it. I can't imagine that that a sovereign state should have to ask permission on who they have to give birth certificates to.
Yeah, the whole thing just shows the complete inversion of, and I mean, it's like a broken record, Mike. Like, how many times do we have to say, well, gee, what we have now is the opposite of what the framers intended? You know, these creeps know perfectly well that it's the opposite of what the framers intended, but the hope is that the public is too stupid or too apathetic or whatever, too brainwashed to do anything about it. And so, you know, I'm happy to say, Mike, you are the first, as I said you would be, you're the first interview I'm doing for the book Nullification. And what's funny is that apart from you and apart from Judge Napolitano, among the big guns in TV and radio, as compared to my other books where I've gotten all kinds of media, people want to have me on, the big TV and radio people are missing in action on this. The idea of actually saying to the federal government, look, you know, we've tried the strategy of voting for a new stooge to replace the old stooge. We've tried this and that. We've tried to vote them out. We've done all these things, and the government just keeps growing and growing and growing no matter what we do, no matter what pretty speeches Newt Gingrich gives. None of it makes a bit of difference. And so now, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to say, we're just not doing it. Whatever insane thing you're making the states do, whatever thing you're making them blow their money on at a time like this, we're just not doing it. Well, you know, good luck getting some of these big radio people to promote that. They want to talk about some trivial election somewhere that isn't going to mean a darn thing.
Yeah, I'm off the reservation with you, Tom. Dr. Woods. I can call you doctor now, can't I?
Oh, well, you could for 10 years, but I insist you call me Tom.
Well, wait, it was another degree you were working on, though. You finally got the degree.
I was working on a master's in economics, but I've always had a PhD.
Okay, right.
Well, I guess not. I wasn't born with it.
Okay, all right.
I was 27.
All right. So just to clarify for the audience, in order to gain entrance into Indiana University, he had to go get the doctorate. And then they would let you speak there in the hell. Was it Indiana University that banned you?
It's Indiana University, that's right, because I wasn't credentialed enough. So I do have a website, tomwoods.com, that lists my credentials, and it seems to me that, well, anyway, I mean, there's no point. You know, I'm a good sport. I roll with the punches. I've never had something like that happen to me before, but they finally backed down, and I am going to be speaking at Indiana University in September.
Okay. Folks, get this book. It's called Nullification. Tom, we've been plugging it for a week. And hope to get you up into the top 100 at Amazon today. If you people have some free time, go and grab yourself a copy at Amazon.com of Nullification. You may be wondering, Mike, I'm new to the show. I don't know what nullification is. Well, this is what Tom is talking about here, because big media and the powers that be don't want you to know what nullification is. They especially don't want you asking your state representatives, hey, have you ever heard about this thing called nullification? Tom, if you would, explain, historically speaking, the precedent for nullification and who its creator or creators was.
Well, one of the main creators was Thomas Jefferson in 1798, who said that, you know, look, if the federal government is allowed to have a monopoly on deciding what its powers are, we have no right to be surprised when it keeps on discovering new ones.
Right.
And the fact is that we can't rely on the Supreme Court to put things right when the federal government violates the Constitution because, number one, the Supreme Court is part of the federal government, after all. I mean, if I'm having a dispute with you, you would not consider it fair if I said my cousin will decide it or my mother. Obviously, she has an interest in she's one of the parties, in effect, or related to one of the parties. So no, and plus the Supreme Court is full of fallible human beings, too, believe it or not. They are not demigods, after all. So what do we do when all the branches of government are oppressing us, are violating the Constitution, treating it like a piece of garbage? Well, the answer, says Jefferson, is the rightful remedy, said Jefferson, was for the states to say, well, we're just not doing it. If it's not in the Constitution, we don't have the right to do it. I mean, you don't have the right to make us do it, and so we're not going to. So what we need is a balance of power whereby the states can say to the federal government, no, you have gone too far. It is the only way you can maintain a system like the one we were supposed to have. It is the only way. And it wasn't like Jefferson just woke up drunk one morning and came up with this idea. Like, oh, I'll write this out and see what the country thinks. It was that Jefferson is actually building on an already existing line of thought. I mean, in Virginia, they were very skeptical about ratifying the Constitution in 1788. They said, this thing is going to grow to huge proportions. There are loopholes in this thing that you can drive a truck through. We're just not doing it. And the supporters of the Constitution assured them, look, don't worry about it. This government only has the powers that are expressly given to it in this document. And here, we'll even tell you this, that if this federal government should try to do anything supplementary, anything beyond what's in here, we'll be exonerated from it. So don't worry. Well, that's nullification. That's how the Constitution was sold to the people of Virginia, was with the understanding of the power of nullification. Whereas today, you talk about it, and people would say, well, boy, you must be some kind of non-mainstream thinker. Well, yeah, I'm proud to be, because look who the mainstream thinkers are. We got Bill Clinton, we got Barack Obama, we got Mitch McConnell. This is our glorious political spectrum. Who would want to be in that mainstream? I have no idea. You want to be in the right. And the right position now is to say we've tried every other possible avenue for limiting this thing, and nothing, absolutely nothing works. So now we need the states, as many as we can get on board, to start saying, you know what, we're going to start reviewing federal legislation that makes us do things that are unconstitutional, and we're just going to stop doing it, and what are you going to do about it?
Tom Woods is here. The book is Nullification. Are you at least a little bit encouraged and maybe even a little bit surprised that one of the most progressive or liberal states, you can use whatever term you want, is actually in the process of nullifying one of the biggest beastly edicts from the federal government, and that's California. California is marching forward with legal marijuana, baby. They're just saying, what law, what federal judge? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes to show whenever you talk about stuff like this, you get ignorant and vicious people saying, "Well, what are you trying to do? Restore the Southern Confederacy?" Well, it's interesting. The Confederate President Jefferson Davis, as he was leaving the U.S. Senate, actually denounced nullification. So I'm not exactly sure what's so neo-Confederate about this, but you're right. I mean, look at California doing this, and California is in effect saying, we don't see where the federal government gets the power under the Constitution to ban this thing. When they banned alcohol, they at least had the honesty to amend the Constitution to give them the power to do it.
Right.
Whereas now they just do whatever they want. They don't have to amend the Constitution's Constitution. They just go ahead and do it. So yeah, and even if they didn't manage to get this referendum passed, I could easily see cash-strapped states starting to say, look, you may have this crazy, unwinnable drug policy that's helped to ruin our cities. You may have that policy, and you may have your DEA agents, but we're not going to devote any resources to it. What do you think of that? I mean, at some point, the states have got to staunch the red ink and do something to protect themselves. And I don't see what they can do other than saying, the federal government has 27,000 different agendas for us. We have the money for 1.3 of them, so we're just not doing them anymore.
Is it possible, Tom? Is it possible that we're just at the beginning of the new nullification revolution, and people really, because they don't know about it, haven't gotten the memo yet. Let's just look, if you will. You live in Alabama. I live in Louisiana. Your state shoreline is getting ready to be clobbered by this monstrous government-created oil spill. My state's coastline has already been decimated. There's another 30-mile-long oil slick that's going to hit us within the next 24 hours and permanently ruin my fishing grounds at Grand Isle. My governor and my legislature, despite my protestations and pleas, Tom, have refused to nullify the Coast Guard's prevalence in our waters and say that if you try and stop another boat, we're going to send National Guardsmen out on airboats and we're going to arrest you. And if you try to bring a prisoner on land that you stopped from cleaning oil up, where are you going to quarter them at? Because as soon as you hit Louisiana land, you're going to jail.
Yeah, well, I've heard some rumblings to this effect in Florida. I mean, it's interesting to recall Jefferson in 1797, who was of the opinion that we ought to be able to try federal officials for treason against the state they live in,
right,
for carrying out some of these federal edicts. Well, you know, again, that's not me talking, Mike. That's Thomas Jefferson.
Right,
you know, you
right.
take it up with him. But yeah, that's exactly what I find is that when people have it explained to them, when they understand the real history of it, that northern states actually used it more often than southern ones did, that Jefferson called for it, Madison called for it, it was used to defend blacks against the execution of the fugitive slave laws. There's a very honorable tradition of this. Well, once they hear it, they're ready to go. My friend Michael Bolden runs the great 10th Amendment Center.
Right. He
gave a Tea Party speech. You got to see this speech, Mike. It's beautiful. He gives this speech, and clearly the Tea Party group they don't know what on God's green earth he's talking about. They've never heard any of this. By the end of that speech, they are cheering like crazy. And I myself, believe it or not, Mike, this is a crazy world we're living in. I just spoke on the eve of the Iowa State Republican Convention on Friday night. Ron Paul and I were the dinner speakers.
Right.
I mean, such is the world. Here's the guy who was despised. No one would talk to him. So I got up there, I talked about the Constitution, they ignore it and all of the things they're doing, and I said, but look, both parties are responsible for the mess we're in right now, and frankly, when the left expands the government, within 20 years, the Republicans are running around defending all the changes, and this just goes on and on and on and on. And I said, I happen to be a little more impatient than that. And I said, what we need now is for states to say, you know what, we've tried everything, but now we're going to follow Jefferson's advice and say we're just not doing it. And this crowd cheered like crazy and stood on its feet. And these are the most establishment of the establishment, at a state Republican convention. They're ready to do this when it's spelled out to them.
Tom Woods is with us. The book is Nullification. Folks, let me just read you some of the... And Tom, man, I know why this took you over a year to write now, just going through, and I've read chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 thus far. Haven't made it to the end, but I have browsed all the way to the end. Folks, let me just read you some of the great historical insight you're going to get here. And you need to learn your history, and when you learn your history... And then you take that founder's red pill like Tom took long before I did, and Tom helped me to digest it. You will digest it as well. James Madison and the duty to interpose. And if you would, when I finish my little harangue here, Tom, explain the difference between interposition and nullification. Virginia informs the people. This is an address to the people of Virginia. I assume this is the one that was given at the time of ratification, but you can clarify that. Unconstitutional laws are void. Nullification is the rightful remedy. The Kentucky resolutions of 1799. Let's go forward a little bit. We resist resolutions of the General Assembly of Connecticut. Connecticut were nullifiers? No. They're a northern state. They couldn't have been. Nullification versus slavery. Joint resolution of the legislature of Wisconsin. You got a lot of splaining to do, Mr. Woods.
Yeah, well, what I did was at the second half of the book, because, you're going to get it, the legal establishment's going to go after you for this because they're all taught federal supremacy BS in the law schools, and I addressed the whole supremacy clause thing, by the way. So, but what I wanted to do was basically, frankly, kind of just really stick it in their faces by saying, look, here are 11 documents from U.S. history that we're supposed to pretend do not exist, but they do exist, and as a matter of fact, here they are. And they amplify my point, not yours. And you're right, Mike. I went out of my way to show. Look, here's a statement in the 19th century from from the state of Connecticut. Here's one from Wisconsin. Here's a pamphlet that demolishes all the counter-arguments that has not been reprinted since the 1830s, but yet every single one of its arguments is completely on target. Yeah, I did this so that young budding historians will have, be able to lick their chops and have something to work on,
right.
and also to show that I didn't make this up. This is real. This is part of American history that ain't in the textbooks. I mean, if you're waiting to learn real American history from the textbooks, I mean, you're gonna be decrepit. You're gonna have to go to other sources, and I put these sources together in the book. In addition to an actual book on the subject, you also get all these documents. I mean, you get exposed to a part of your history that will make you seriously wonder why the heck, given how ubiquitous this was all over U.S. history, how come I have never heard of this before? Well, I leave the answer to that question to the student for as an exercise.
So you'll let the caller can or the reader can make their mind up on that. What would you say was the last unified attempt at unified is not the right word. The last attempt at nullifying something that had many states participating in it?
I think that I think probably it's been a long time, but probably it was the fugitive slave laws. I mean, the Constitution unfortunately has that clause that talks about returning runaway slaves.
Okay.
But the northern states' argument was, well, that doesn't mean you can do absolutely anything whatsoever to return a runaway slave. And the state's argument was that we have an interest as a state in protecting our citizens against kidnapping. So we want to have a jury trial in our state before anybody is removed from it. So, fugitive slave law all you want, but we're going to institute these various safeguards. And they did that in Wisconsin. They did it throughout New England. And it wasn't a coordinated thing. It wasn't like they all said to each other, we'd like to nullify the fugitive slave law, but we don't dare do it unless we have the support of New England or something. No, each one just did it because it was the right thing to do. And it really stymied the feds. They really had trouble enforcing this thing because the state governments weren't letting them use local jails. They weren't letting their state officials cooperate in any way. Any state official that cooperated in the execution of that law was dismissed immediately. So, again, this happened. This is real American history. This happened. And, you may say, yeah, but, wouldn't the federal government send in the tanks? Well, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they'd have public opinion on their side. Sending the tanks into California because of a dispute over their drug laws. I mean, my mother taught me violence never solved anything, and I think there are enough of us who believe that. If enough states are saying we're not doing it, what are they going to do, if not have to reach some type of modus vivendi with the states?
In other words, they're going to have to come to an agreement, like with Obamacare. Let's say that, look into your crystal ball. Tom Woods is with us. The book is called Nullification. You want to learn American history, real states' rights American history, well, then you want to read this book. It's a fantastic read, as all of Tom's books are. And you can get it at Amazon.com or just go to the front page at MikeChurch.com right now and click on that link, and it'll take you right to the Amazon page. You should buy it. As a matter of fact, you want to talk about a great gift to give away at the 4th of July at your parties? Buy a half a dozen nullification books and give them to your NASCAR friends. Learn them a little something here. I was going to say to you that what happens if Mr. Cuccinelli, the Attorney General of Virginia, who is essentially attempting a nullification, while his state legislature has attempted to nullify, and they haven't attempted, they have actually passed law in the Virginia Assembly saying that the EPA's edicts on carbon dioxide do not work here. We do not recognize them as an authority here. That's tied up in the courts here. What happens, do you think, if the 21-state lawsuit against Obamacare and the individual mandate is kicked down the road, denied by a federal court? Of course, it'll be immediately appealed, and then ultimately winds up at the Supreme Court. Do you have any confidence whatsoever that the court will finally stop this madness? And if they don't, well, then look further into your crystal ball. What's going to happen after that?
Well, I feel like if they were to strike it down, they would realize they're opening a can of worms, because if they strike this down, they're going to have to strike down a whole heck of a lot more on exactly the same ground. So I suspect they'd rather just not go down that road, and they're going to prove once again what a joke the federal courts are as enforcers of the Constitution. Give me I mean, don't make me laugh. So then the question becomes, then what are the states going to do now? And here's why it's such a bad thing to have a federal income tax, which is that if there weren't a federal income tax, it would be a lot easier for the states to nullify something like this. But with the federal income tax, the federal government can impose that penalty on you for not buying the right kind of health care by just, not giving you as much of a tax return. And what is the states going to do about that? It'd be much better to have either, no income tax or different kind of tax structure, or otherwise the states could get some you-know-whats and decide that, that federal gas tax that we help you collect, well, we're going to hold that in escrow until you decide to be a little more faithful to the Constitution. What if 15 major states did that? Again, maybe you would get the federal government to budge a little bit.
Now, this is interesting that you bring this up, and you are a historian, about the collection of the gas taxes. And I seem to recall, I read the Virginia ratification debates from start to finish, and I seem to recall this other guy, what was his name? I think his name was Mason, George Mason, who took one of the things that you're talking about and spent almost an entire day demanding to know how you were to compensate a Virginian for collecting taxes and having to remand them to the federal government. And he was going on and on and on about double taxation. And it seems that that historical moment has passed them by, or has passed us by. I mean, we collect federal taxes. If you own a convenience store, you're collecting federal taxes, Tom, on cigarettes, on beer, on wine, on a lot of food products, and on gasoline. And do you get paid for that? I mean, this is isn't this the exact tyranny that caused tea to be dumped into a harbor and a little fledgling group of colonies to defy the greatest military on earth?
Yeah, well, Mike, I would say this only on your show, because I think only your listeners frankly, are ready to hear it. But ultimately, I mean, given that so-called checks and balances that we learn about in school, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary have checks and balances against each other. Well, wonderful. And but on the other 364 days of the year, they combine with each other to oppress the rest of us. So that is no guarantee against tyranny. Jefferson's view was that you needed to split power up into little bits.
Right.
And the states had to check the federal government. That was the key thing. So there are a few states that are toying, and maybe the Constitution needs to be amended, who knows, but who are toying with a federal tax escrow account, where the only way you could possibly get control over this thing is not by voting for Mitt Romney, where nothing is going to change, nothing, but is by the state saying, that's it. We're the creators of the Constitution. You are so far from the Constitution, it's not even funny. We all know it. So, we're going to hold all federal taxes in escrow at the state level until you get this thing in order, until you get yourself back to a constitutional level. Then you can have it. Well, then maybe something might change. But just cutting things a little around the edges and trying to marginally that's been the strategy for 100 years, and look where it's gotten us.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten us very well. It is the genesis, is it not? Of really, it's at the root of all this angst over debts and deficits. I mean, the ignorance and the refusal by the Congress since 1913 to do its own money coining and to discharge their own constitutional authority. And you can argue, and you can tell us about this too, Tom, about where in the world Congress defined the authority to outsource, if you will, one of their constitutionally mandated, one of the powers we did give them that they are supposed to administer, which is to coin the money, and instead they sold it to the Federal Reserve. But isn't the debt and the deficit, I mean, that's at the heart of all this. Without the ability or the tyrannical authority to spend on behalf of all 50 states, none of this can happen, right?
Yeah, of course not. And now we're in a situation where, according to Richard Fisher of the Dallas Federal Reserve, we are facing 100, I'm not making this up, $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. That is to say, over and above the regular budget, $100 trillion is coming due in the future for the aspects of the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare primarily, for which no provision has been made. Now this is unpayable, and add on top of that we're going to still have trillion-dollar deficits on top of that.
Right.
But $100 trillion for which there are no taxes ready to go. They have got no spending cuts to deal with this. So in other words, this can't happen. And one of the Woods' rules is that if something can't happen, it won't happen. I mean, you can guarantee that this whole system is going bust. You can absolutely guarantee it. So now is as good a time as any for the states to get used to the practice of looking after their own affairs, because the federal government, it's just the writing is on the wall. Like, there's no way you can deny that. That's unpayable. The federal government is simply going under at some point. So the states may as well get used to running their own affairs, may as well get used to making the hard decisions about what to spend on, what to cut. Might as well get started on that now, because an absolute deluge is coming tomorrow.
Do you find that, and Tom Woods is on the line with us, if you have a question about nullification, interposition, and I forgot you were supposed to...
I'll talk about that.
Yeah, nullification, interposition, and states' rights. 1-866-95-PATRIOT is our telephone number, 866-957-2874. Do you find it deliciously ironic as a historian that the act of the federal Leviathan that was supposed to preserve the Union, which was the War of Northern Aggression against the Southern states and the Confederacy, actually, because it began the end, it nullified nullification, if I read my history correct, and you can comment on that as well, and rendered the states, as your friend Kevin Gutzman calls them, as insular political entities, ended their insular political entity status, and basically neutered them. That the thing that was done to preserve the Union, if we're going to go bankrupt, may, in fact, be the undoing of it because of insolvency.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think the argument in the book Nullification, if I may say so, I think is actually pretty strong in showing the historical basis for nullification, that it goes back to the ratifying Convention of Virginia, at least. We see it being used all through the 19th century for honorable purposes, and it's based on just the nature of what the United States is. It's self-governing societies under the umbrella of a federal government. That was why we revolted against the British. We wanted to have our self-governing societies, and the king wouldn't let us. That's the whole point of the American Revolution. And how do you preserve that? You have to give the states, or reserve to the states, a power of nullification. Now, we could say, well, didn't the Civil War settle this? Well, of course, Civil War was not fought over nullification anyway, but you could say that, things have changed since then, and so on and on. But, that would be like saying, if you and I are disputing the color of the sky, and I say it's blue, and you say it's orange and purple, and then you punch me in the face, does that make it orange and purple? Who would say, the same people who say the Civil War settled this, well, would they also say that the U.S. Army settled the question of the Plains Indians? What kind of moral monster are we to say that philosophical, historical, constitutional questions could be settled by violence? The truth is what it is. The truth is what it is, regardless of historical events. It either is right constitutionally or it's wrong constitutionally. That's my point.
And there's an awful lot that's wrong. So what's the difference between interposition and nullification, if there is one? Is that just semantics?
I think it's largely semantic, but it can help it's a clarifying point, I think. James Madison used the term interposition when he had the Virginia Resolutions of 1798. And by the way, again, this is no one else is going to talk about this. They're going to talk about trivial elections of people who you couldn't slide a credit card between them. They're so close on the issues. But interposition is basically any form of state resistance against the federal government. So it could be the states filing suit against a federal program and seeing how that goes. That would be a form of interposition, whereas nullification would be the most direct form of interposition, whereby the state simply says, well, we're not going to do it. Interposition simply is an image it evokes the image of a state standing in between, that is interposing between the federal government and an unconstitutional law on the one hand and the people of that state on the other. And there are many forms that could take. You could send a petition to the federal government. That'd be a form of interposition. But nullification is the form in which the state simply says, well, look, we don't care what your judges say. We don't care if you listen to our petition. We're here to defend the Constitution, and therefore, in respect to the Constitution, out of respect for that document, we will not go along with what you're saying.
I like the, let's see here. I'll take interposition and nullification for 100, Alex. Let's just use them both in concert here. You know, and Tom, I keep coming back to this, and I apologize for my repetitive nature here, but we are seeing right now here in real time, and it just pains me to no end, if there is no textbook, or if there is to be a textbook case of why the states must reclaim their sovereignty and their 10th Amendment and 9th Amendment rights and end all this interference in our affairs here, is it even possible that you can think of a greater example than what has been done to the coastline of Louisiana? I mean, we have federal edicts being issued, not in international waters, Tom. We have edicts being issued on what you can do in the marsh that is within the boundaries of the sovereign state of Louisiana. Matter of fact, when we entered the Union in 1808, if you look at a map, that sovereign land traveled out about another 100 miles into the Gulf of Mexico before we engineered, thanks to the federal government, that the Mississippi River was not allowed to turn west, which it would have done by now and be coming out near Morgan City. I mean, if you can't find a case for states' rights to preserve your own property in your own state, well then, I don't know, I might have to join the pessimistic school and say we're cooked anyways. I mean, you're going to have the legal status to do it. If you don't have the will to do it, then good grief.
Yeah, well, I mean, it boils down to the fact that, you know, it was shared by everybody, the presumption that the state government is going to be more responsive to you than the federal government. I mean, sometimes you can beat City Hall, sometimes you can beat the State House and the governor's mansion. Very, very hard to beat Washington, D.C. You're more likely to actually know the people in your State House than you are to know your U.S. senator. So, I mean, you can exert more control over them. And so, therefore, they should have the residual of authority, the vast reservoir of powers not delegated to the federal government should rest with them because they're the ones you have the most direct oversight over. So if we can't trust the very people, well, I don't trust any of these SOBs. Let me put it that way. But you know, if I have to choose between one class of them and another, I'd rather have one that, you know, the State House guy lives down the street from me and I know his kids and that sort of thing, and I can hector him a little bit. I'd rather have that than, you know, good luck trying to deal with the EPA. You know, good luck. I mean, you'll never even get in to see the assistant to the traveling secretary. Forget it.
Yeah, I kept hoping that Governor Jindal would issue an Andrew Jackson moment and say, Ken Salazar has issued his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, the cheers for a move like that would come from blacks and whites, Democrats and Republicans, rich and poor. I mean, just anybody who isn't totally brainwashed by Washington, D.C. would say, finally, somebody who just stands up and says, no, this is insane. You have no right to do this. What are you going to do, throw me, the governor, in jail? Go ahead. Go ahead. I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
I'll get reelected from jail.
Yeah.
I will get reelected from jail.
And the governor of Arizona is getting more and more brazen. I mean, that piece that I played for you at the top of the hour from Jan Brewer sounded like a call to arms to me. Mr. President, do your job. Does this look secure to you? This is a joke here, what you're doing to my state. Tom, we've got some people on the line that want to talk to you. The book is called Nullification. Get it. It is chock full of historical insight, and you will be able to argue with your friends. No, dude, you're just wrong. I read Nullification. It's in this chapter here, and Jefferson said this or Madison said that. Get the book. It's at Amazon.com, at your local booksellers, and, of course, it's at MikeChurch.com, too. Let's see here. John in Illinois. John, you're on with Tom Woods. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm from Illinois. Unfortunately, I can't see Illinois ever going for nullification or interposition because it's so held hostage by the city of Chicago and how it holds such a liberal hold over the rest of the state. And so I'm trying to figure out what would be best from Illinois' point of view in terms of trying to deal with these issues. I'm also a physician, by the way, and I've actually been very much involved in the war with issues over healthcare reform, which is going to destroy my profession. And I'm just trying to figure out how we are going to turn this around. And the only thing I can think of is at some point people get upset enough, whether it's cap and trade as a trigger or something else, where the people themselves to say, hey, we're not even going to wait for the states. Let's just stop paying taxes.
He's asking a question about not paying taxes on an individual basis. In other words, it's what's called going gold.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, that would work if let's say 10 million Americans just suddenly stop paying. That would work because there isn't enough room in the prisons for all of them. You know,
right.
and you know, so that would work. But it's the who goes first question. And you know, a lot of us have families. You know, and I think the whole tax structure is completely unjust, but not to the point where I'm going to leave my 4 kids, you know, without a father. So if those are our choices, then we're really in big trouble. But unfortunately, it seems to be that's almost all that's left is just the people in one way or another withdrawing their consent from the system. But also, it seems to me that, given that, as I said earlier, the figures make it obvious that we're headed for one form or another of bankruptcy. I mean, that's unavoidable. That's not crazy talk or scaremongering or anything. No, those are the numbers. That this is an inevitability, and when that happens, we'll be in a position where things that are unthinkable today will become thinkable. People will realize, okay, there is no government fairy coming to rescue us after all. We, the people in the various states, are going to have to sort out this mess on our own. And so the one silver lining of bankruptcy, which may turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to this country, is that it'll force Americans to take matters back into their own hands, make practical decisions, because there is no government fairy coming, and maybe exert more control over their own lives once again. That would be the silver lining of it. But short of that, I don't know, other than nullification, or one thing I'd like to see, and you'd like to see too, given that we have more control over the states than we have over the federal government, I'd love to see the Constitution say that if 2/3 of the states vote to reject a federal law, that law is repealed. Nullification does not repeal a law. It simply says a state is just not going to enforce it because it's obviously unconstitutional. But to say that if 2/3 of the states say no, where the people really have still some kind of a voice, the states, 2/3 of them say no, then that law is repealed. Well, I think that actually would be an institutional change that would restrain these people. Now, how we, if we could get that is another question, but I think that would have a very, very salutary role to play.
Tom Woods is with us. The book is called Nullification. Richard in Maryland. Richard, you're on with Tom Woods. How are you?
All right. How you doing, Mike?
Good.
Hey, Mike, talk to you, Tom. My question is, since the ultimate power lies within the states, couldn't the states or the governor get together and say, look, being that private property is a right, and that's part of the Constitution, and our money is our private property, why couldn't the governor say that starting today, if you are a legal resident of a certain state and you have a business license that we issue to you to do business in our state, that you will no longer pay any federal income tax from your employees' paychecks or your own, and let the federal government try to come down here and change it?
Yeah, Tom addressed that earlier in the show, so obviously he's just tuning in, Tom. And this is one of the solutions that you proposed. That is basically a nullification, which is the state saying, fine, we'll collect your stupid taxes. We're going to put them in a bank account, and you're not getting them until you repeal this law.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it would be great. And as I say, if people are thinking, well, that's crazy talk. How dare you say? Well, give me a better idea. Give me something that we haven't tried 50 zillion times. Give me something other than let's vote for whatever stooge the Republicans put up. Give me something that we haven't already done. But yeah, I certainly that would be nice to try. I don't think people are ready for that yet. I think we're at an earlier stage where we first have to persuade them of what the country's supposed to look like. We have to show them the historical evidence. So this is what we're supposed to have. This, on the other hand, may as well be a government from Mars as compared to what we're supposed to have. And so get them thinking and show them that what we're saying is American history, is the real thing, and what they've been taught, that's the crazy innovation. That's
Correct.
the crazy crazy talk. We're actually talking sanity. And once we can get a critical mass of people to appreciate this, then we can consider, taking more, I hate to say radical steps, but in effect that's what they are. I mean, remember, Jefferson would have been absolutely, and not just Jefferson, I mean, the whole founding generation would have been appalled at the idea of a federal income tax. And part of the reason was that a federal income tax that gives you the direct federal hand right into your pocket, whereas any other kind of tax, I'm against all these taxes, but any other kind of tax, at least you have the choice whether or not you pay it. If I don't have to drink whiskey, I'll figure something else out, or I'll secretly make my own whiskey or whatever, but I don't have to pay that tax, so they can't lord things over me at that point. But now that they've got the hand in the pocket, it's a lot easier for them to kick us around.
We're just about out of time. Tom Woods is with us. The book is called Nullification. Here's my my final query to you, and you're echoing something that the great Bruce Fein said at our Article 5 Amendment Convention. And if you want to amend that Constitution, well, then Article 5 gives the states the power to do so. We can talk about that another day. But you have a chapter in here that says federalism cannot last without nullification. And Fein made one of the most impassioned defenses of why do we want federalism? And Fein said, well, we want federalism because we want the states to compete. When you compete, you get lower prices and better services. Same is true in government. Now, you have a chapter in here, pretty much the same idea. Federalism cannot last without nullification. Why can't it?
Well, I mean, I love Bruce Fein's point. It's a point I often make. But the reason federalism can't last without nullification is if the states don't have any way to say to the federal government, we think you have done something that violates the Constitution. In other words, like if you and I enter into a contract, both of us get to interpret the terms. I don't say, Mike Church, only you get to interpret what this contract means, but I trust you. I mean, only a fool would do that, and
right.
Not because you're a bad guy, Mike, but only a fool would do that. So because they know what's going to happen. The other party will interpret it in its own favor. If the states can't say no, then the federal government will just keep saying yes, 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 and gobble up all their powers. That's what Jefferson and Madison warned about.
All right, Tom, I wish you the best, but you already knew that. And look, man, be of good faith here. Well, I'm confident that the term nullification and the advocacy of it is not a dead letter, despite those Decepticons, fake, phony conservatives that don't want anything to do with it. Well, like Jefferson also said, Tom, liberty is hard. It must be relentlessly defended. And if you're not willing to defend it, well, then you're not going to have it. And
absolutely.
And you know this, and I know this, and we talked about it all morning long here, that the status quo is defending FDR. They're defending LBJ. They're defending Bill Clinton. This, in my estimation, is indefensible. And anyone that won't tell you otherwise, well, then is not worthy of your support. That's yours truly talking, not you. But I know you've written about the same thing, so you hold similar views. Folks, the book is called Nullification, How to Resist Federal Tyranny in the 21st Century. He is Tom Woods. You can get it at MikeChurch.com. You can't remember that? Go to Amazon.com. Get it at your local bookseller, probably buried underneath the latest edition of Harry Reid's book or Nancy Pelosi's book. But if you dig for it, it'll be there. Tom, it was great having you, and I appreciate it as always, my friend, and keep up the good work and keep the faith.
Thanks, Mike. Can I just mention TomWoods.com?
Sure.
And also, I've got a YouTube coming out tomorrow that you're going to love. I'll email it to you.
Please do. We'll lift the audio off of it.
It's awesome.
All right, Tom. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, anytime. And, folks, that's going to do it for this segment. We'll be right back.